Yeah, so I'm in a new channel. A few hiccups aside, everything's basically back to normal, and I'm just going to do a couple of videos. I did a few re-uploads, um, and at least now I know that the new settings are like disabled the enhancement shit, so it doesn't fuck up the video or audio quality. So really, I'm kind of better off for the most part, but going to kind of be disorganized. I'm still limited to 15 minutes, of course. Um, but I wanted to talk a little bit about lat biomechanics and the AC joint and shit like that. And I've been watching a lot of lifting videos recently. Now, as I said on the previous channel, I had been on a cut for a while, which is how I got my passion for lifting back. Because the lifting stuff and all that, I know I'm fat, but it's actually the nutrition stuff that gets my passion back. And of course, I start watching stuff again. I get back into the lifting stuff in general, and it kind of bleeds out from there. Everything, a lot of this stuff is tangentially related, and that was something I did. I should have tried to keep myself more focused on that. But by nature of watching a lot of channels, you know, I've been seeing a lot of new channels come up, and so sometimes I'll make these gigantic posts, but I also like to make videos. I've done, you know, 3.5 hour fucking videos on shit like this in the past. Maybe at some point, if I set up a channel where I can do more than 15 minutes, I will again. But one of the things I notice a lot of the times with lifters, especially the lighter ones where they can do pull-ups and chin-ups, now I have older videos of mine from like 10 years ago when I had, you know, cut down really lean and I had abs and all that, and I could do chin-ups back then. I don't have the upload slots for today to put those, but I will at some point. But something I noticed with a lot of those is, most of the time they have, really big really big teres major, decent biceps, and then everything else is kind of hollow, right? Like I call it hollow upper back, and then no traps really, and not even any lats, and a lot of that just has to boil down to the fact that they're doing these so-called full range chin ups or barbell rows and all that. But the problem is, due to the way the lats work, most of the challenge on the lats is in the top half, so to speak, of the pull down or pull up, or like the bottom half of a barbell row. And individuals have this kind of erroneous goal of touching the bar to their chest, or literally getting their chin over the bar or something like that, which is not something you can do with a weight, whether it's a bar or your own body weight or your body weight plus extra, uh, through a full range of motion. And so, trying to cover this real quick. Like as I mentioned, I had been on a cut, but then I got a lung infection, probably a confluence of reasons. But basically had a month off at this point. Probably going to take another week and then start to build again. Probably start with some shoulder rehab, prehab stuff. But part of the problem for me is I was coughing so much, so violently, that I was basically getting overuse injuries in my shoulder area. A little bit on the right shoulder, but it came and went pretty fast. But the left shoulder has been fucked up for like several weeks now. Um, to the point where I went to the hospital and got antibiotics, and now it's just kind of lingering a bit and just kind of still aggravating occasionally, but it's mostly subsided. But the pain I was having was in like where the pec major tendon is, and then as far as I can tell, the supra and infraspinatus, maybe the teres minor as well. But also it could be the subscapularis where it inserts on the front, overlapping with the pec major. Maybe it's just that. I don't know. But anyway, I was getting basically strain injuries, and I've done everything to prevent that, and then I'm going to really slowly start to build it again. So it's had me thinking even more about that stuff than normal. But to go back to my point on that, when I watch a lot of these skinny dudes do pull-ups or whatever, they do the full range, but they don't really have the muscles that they're at least supposedly wanting to train. But a lot of that is, if you watch how they do it, they don't allow the scapulae to move much, to the point to where, like, at the bottom, so to speak, you can actually see the rhomboids contract to prevent, um, the upward rotation of the scapulae. And most of the movement they get is actually shoulder extension. And the problem is, for the majority of the range of the movement, at least the top, the middle up, the way that they do them is primarily on the teres major, just due to its angle of pull on the humerus is pretty much ideal at that point. So they don't get much scapular movement. They get mostly isometric contraction from the other stuff, and a lot of that is just due to them being light enough to pull it off. And I'm trying to abbreviate a lot of this. It's kind of not that great of a video, but whatever. But suffice to say that they don't really hit their lats that well, because you really can't, the way that they're doing them. And the problem is like, so at the top of the pull-up, for example, where the teres major's ability to extend the humerus is the best, that's actually the worst point for the lats, because in the top of a pull-up or chin-up, or like the top half of a barbell row, the the lats are essentially pulling inward, like, in the frontal plane, right? Like they're both pulling, basically sideways towards the spine, right? So they're really kind of pinching the shoulder blades together, um, or pinching the shoulder blades together. That's the direction they're pulling. Like they're both, kind of inwards towards the middle. So they really have no ability to work on the movement at that point. And then I watched this one guy, and he mentioned on the negative, he felt like he wasn't staying tight in his lats. Probably the reason is because at that top end, if you're trying to be strict about it, you really can't contract the lats. They're pretty much almost fully shortened, and so they lose their ability to contract. And then on the way down, they sort of forget about it in a way, if that makes sense, in a kinesthetic way. And they basically don't salvage the contraction even once they get back to the point where they could do it, because the eccentric, you can handle more weight, and at that point their biceps and all that stuff, again, for a lighter weight dude, is more than capable of descending on that. And there's this one dude I watched a bit. I don't know, maybe I annoyed him or something, I don't know. But I left a bunch of comments. But at some point I'll try to be more collective with these videos. But brand new channel, and I don't plan my videos, and I'm never super collected anyway. It's hard for me to try to compact myself into 15 minutes. But barbell rows are the same kind of way. Like, once the elbows come flush to the body, that's basically the extent of the lats. At that point, they're pulling inward. And any further than that, especially the way individuals tend to do them, is going to be primarily, well, almost exclusively, shoulder hyperextension, which again, teres major, rhomboids, this and that, are going to be in a way better position. That sort of close packed position of the upper back. But, that position is one you can only really get into with lighter weights that don't stimulate the lats sufficiently at the bottom. And then if you use a weight big enough for the lats at the bottom, it's too heavy to go all the way up and like squeeze and pause and all that. And so the only way if your goal is to touch your chest with it or whatever, the only way you're going to be able to do it is to lurch or launch it, body English, whatever people want to call it. I don't call it cheating. It's just that's how you would have to do it to accomplish the goal with that load. It's not incorrect. It might not be your intended, goal or whatever. But a lot of people don't understand the biomechanics of the lats. Oh yeah, and so I got a lingering cough. I am using cough drops. I might cough a bit. But, you know, they have a goal. Everybody talks about strictness, and I think it really offsets a lot of people. And like a comment I made on this one dude's channel 10 years ago, I noticed in a lot of his videos, he was doing what I used to do because I was super stickler on the form, and, the rep wasn't perfect. And so I need to go down on weight or whatever. And I've been there. Like, I understand the mode of thinking, but, I try to alleviate people on this idea of perfect form, or like the idea you'll get injured if you don't do it perfect and this and that. Because a lot of these channels like Squat University, they just want to sell coaching. They have to feel, if they're not an expert with information you don't have, then then you're not going to pay them, basically. Um, but I've always done everything to put that info out for free, and that was how I used to be. Squat 185 perfect form, but then I get to 205. Oh no, I'm bending over too far. This that, and same thing with the rows. And it's not cheating with heavyweight to, lurch or English or whatever you want to call it. Again, it's the wrong goal for the wrong load. I do it that way. However, the way I do it, this is another thing. A lot of individuals can't really see like what exactly they're looking at. And what I mean is that if you look at my videos of barbell rows, which that's another one I'll put up in a bit, yeah, it looks pretty close to the way a lot of people do it. It's still not that body English. However, what you really can't see in the video necessarily, unless you know what you're looking for, is that a lot of that top half isn't me just, pulling it upward and coming down to meet it. I'm actually under resistance, you know, pulling my shoulder blades, basically rotating them medially in the transverse plane, right? So think about rolling, pinching your shoulder blades together, how they're kind of, dragging across the back of the rib cage. Think about Superman. It's not just proud chest retracted and depressed. It's literally pulling them together. If you imagine you're Clark Kent, grab the front of you, keep your elbows against your body, and as you're opening up, dragging across like you're trying to put your elbows, touch them behind you or something. If you imagine that sort of thing, that's what I'm doing. This dynamic thoracic flexion and protraction, and then, extension, and then kind of, pinching shoulder blades at the top. And that's what actually finishes the reps for me. A lot of people, when they do that stuff, they try to do it with shoulder hyperextension, where they come back past the midline. You see that a lot. Starting strength. People do it a lot with lighter weights. And the problem is they can do it at the lighter weight, but when they progress their range, they get lower and lower with it. They stop touching the chest. It starts ending lower, and they feel like they're doing it wrong or cheating or whatever, and then they drop the weight. But they're really getting what they want to get. They just don't realize it. As the weight gets heavier, your lats are doing what they can. But what's cool about it is that you build it like that over time. Just let it be what it's going to be. And then at some point, you're going to have to deload if you get strong enough. Well, at that point, you'll be stricter with heavier weights than the past. So for an example, when I get up to 365 on barbell rows, I also have a medium and light day. Well, I mean, I have that all the time, but by the time I get to 365, I can do, 250 or whatever it is on the 75 day, pretty well controlled all the way up and down. I can't pinch and squeeze necessarily, but the form is a lot more what people would consider strict. And then when I have my light day, that's like 185 or something, then I can really come up, shoulder hyperextension, get those elbows high up above your back at the top, right? Really squeeze and all that. And so what I do is I have 3 separate days where I get a sufficient stimulus for the lats on the heavy day, sufficient for the upper back and squeezing and all that on the light day. And then the middle in between is kind of like the best of both worlds. So I train the full movement pattern to a realistic level, but just, I split that out. Now you can do that with, machines that take weight off as you get further back, but there's all sorts of different ways to do this shit. and I'm at the end of this video. So, kind of a hacky video, but that's it for this one.